April 12th. As we look into the Old Testament today, we'll be reading in Joshua chapter 5, 6, and 7. But before we do, let me give you an overview of what we'll find there. Israel had experienced a great miracle. The enemy was frightened and God was at work. Now was the time for action. But God told his people to wait. Why? So that he might prepare them for the conquest of the land. You and I, we must deal with the past. See, the new generation had not received the mark of the covenant. So this ritual was a reaffirmation of their relationship with God, circumcision symbolizing putting off what belongs to the sinful flesh and devoting the heart wholly to the Lord. The nation had experienced this collectively in crossing the Jordan, but it had to be made personal. And we must trust for the present. The nation stopped eating manna and started eating food that God naturally provided. Now, of course, there is a place for the miraculous, but God never wastes miracles. If we do the possible, he will do the impossible. The women baked unleavened bread for Passover, and the nation remembered how God had redeemed them from the land of Egypt. And we must submit for the future, just like the nation of Israel. Now, Joshua met Jesus Christ and learned that the Lord already had a plan for taking Jericho. All Joshua had to do was obey and remember that he was on holy ground. And from that time, whenever Joshua took off his shoes, it reminded him that he was second in command, and that was the secret of his victory. And as we move on to chapter 6 in Joshua, we find that if God calls you to do his work, he will tell you how to do it. You don't have to figure it out yourself. Now, his plans may seem foolish to you at times, but they always work if you obey by faith. Don't trust your own instincts. As we today seek to conquer territory for the Lord, we don't follow the same procedure Joshua used, but we, like him, must obey the same principles of faith and obedience. And then in Joshua chapter 7, we find that we can be tempted in the midst of victory. The spies were tempted to be presumptuous, and Achan to be covetous. Achan should have been attending to his military duties, but his eyes wandered, and he walked into sin. We'll learn the principle that we never sin alone. God sees his people as one, so the sin of Achan was the sin of the whole nation. One man's sin caused the death of 36 soldiers. Sin ultimately brings defeat. The secret of success is knowing and obeying God's word. And Achan knew that, but he deliberately disobeyed God and brought defeat to the army, disgrace to the Lord, and dismay to his commander. Joshua started looking back instead of looking ahead. And the other principle we'll find at work, as we read in Joshua chapter 7, is the fact that sin cannot be hidden forever. There is a time to pray about a problem, and a time to get up and deal with it. Now, the punishment may seem severe to us, but Achan knew the rules. The main thing is the glory of God. And with that, let's begin our reading today in the Old Testament. April 12th. Joshua chapter 5, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 15. When all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so the people of Israel could cross, they lost heart and were paralyzed with fear. At that time, the Lord told Joshua, "Use knives of flint to make the Israelites a circumcised people again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the entire male population of Israel at Gibeath Hararaloth. Joshua had to circumcise them because all the men who were old enough to bear arms when they left Egypt had died in the wilderness. Those who left Egypt had all been circumcised, but none of those born after the Exodus during the years in the wilderness had been circumcised. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the men who were old enough to bear arms when they left Egypt had died. For they had disobeyed the Lord, and the Lord vowed he would not let them enter the land he had sworn to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So Joshua circumcised their sons, who had not been circumcised, on the way to the promised land, those who had grown up to take their fathers' places. After all the males had been circumcised, they rested in the camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt." So that place has been called Gilgal to this day. While the Israelites were camped at Gilgal, on the plains of Jericho, they celebrated Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the first month, the month that marked their exodus from Egypt. The very next day, they began to eat unleavened bread and roasted grain harvested from the land. No manna appeared that day, and it was never seen again. So, from that time on, the Israelites ate from the crops of Canaan. As Joshua approached the city of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man facing him with sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for this is holy ground." And Joshua did as he was told. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut, because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go in or out. But the Lord said to Joshua, "I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its mighty warriors. Your entire army is to march around the city once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the horns, have all the people give a mighty shout. Then the walls of the city will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the city." So Joshua called together the priests and said, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant, and assign 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn." Then he gave orders to the people, "March around the city, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the Ark of the Lord." After Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests with the ram's horns started marching in the presence of the Lord, blowing the horns as they marched, and the priests carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant followed behind them. Armed guards marched both in front of the priests and behind the ark, with the priests continually blowing the horns. "Do not shout. Do not even talk," Joshua commanded. "Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout." So the ark of the Lord was carried around the city once that day, and then everyone returned to spend the night in the camp. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests again carried the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests with the ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Armed guards marched both in front of the priests with the horns and behind the ark of the Lord. All this time, the priests were sounding their horns. On the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They followed this pattern for 6 days. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the city as they had done before, but this time they went around the city 7 times. The 7th time around, as the priests sounded the long blast on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The city and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourselves will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble on all Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury. When the people heard the sound of the horns, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the city from every side and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, donkeys, everything. Then Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Keep your promise. Go to the prostitute's house and bring her out, along with all her family." The young men went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned the city and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house, because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. At that time, Joshua invoked this curse: "May the curse of the Lord fall on anyone who tries to rebuild the city of Jericho. At the cost of his youngest son, he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his name became famous throughout the land. But Israel was unfaithful concerning the things set apart for the Lord. A man named Achan had stolen some of these things, so the Lord was very angry with the Israelites. Achan was the son of Carmi, of the family of Zimri, of the clan of Zerah, and of the tribe of Judah. Joshua sent some of his men from Jericho to spy out the city of Ai, east of Bethel, near Beth-aven. When they returned, they told Joshua, "It's a small town, and it won't take more than 2,000 or 3,000 of us to destroy it. There's no need for all of us to go there." So approximately 3,000 warriors were sent, but they were soundly defeated. The men of Ai chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the quarries, and they killed about 36 who were retreating down the slope. The Israelites were paralyzed with fear at this turn of events, and their courage melted away. Joshua and the leaders of Israel tore their clothing in dismay, threw dust on their heads, and bowed down facing the ark of the Lord until evening. Then Joshua cried out, "Sovereign Lord, why did you bring us across the Jordan River if you're going to let the Amorites kill us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side. Lord, what am I to say now that Israel has fled from its enemies? For when the Canaanites and all the other people living in the land hear about it, they will surround us and wipe us off the face of the earth. And then what will happen to the honor of your great name?" But the Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying on your face like this? Israel has sinned and broken my covenant. They have stolen the things that I commanded to be set apart for me. And they have not only stolen them, they have also lied about it and hidden the things among their belongings. That is why the Israelites are running from their enemies in defeat. For now Israel has been set apart for destruction. I will not remain with you any longer unless you destroy the things among you that were set apart for destruction. Get up, command the people to purify themselves in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, Hidden among you, O Israel, are things set apart for the Lord. You will never defeat your enemies until you remove these things. In the morning you must present yourselves by tribes, and the Lord will point out the tribe to which the guilty man belongs. That tribe must come forward with its clans, and the Lord will point out the guilty clan. That clan will then come forward, and the Lord will point out the guilty family. Finally, each member of the guilty family must come one by one. The one who has stolen what was set apart for destruction will himself be burned with fire, along with everything he has, for he has broken the covenant of the Lord and has done a horrible thing in Israel. April 12th. Our reading in the New Testament today takes place in the book of Luke, chapter 15. Just before we begin the narrative, allow me to tell you what's going on here. These parables are Christ's defense of his ministry, explaining why he fellowshiped with sinners and even ate with them. See, he saw what they were. They were sheep that had gone astray and needed a shepherd to bring them home. They were lost coins, stamped with the image of God, needing to get back into circulation again. And they were disobedient sons who were wasting their inheritance and needed to come back home to the Father. Jesus saw how they got that way. See, sheep are foolish animals and naturally go astray. But the spiritual shepherds in Israel had not faithfully ministered to them. The woman lost the coin because of carelessness, and the son was lost because of his willfulness. The father did not search for the boy, but let him learn his lessons the hard way and discover how good it was back home. And then as we have our reading today in Luke 15, we'll see that he saw what they could be. He saw the potential. Jesus always saw the potential in people. The sheep could be brought back to the flock and bring joy to the shepherd. The coin could be found, and the son could return home and lovingly serve his father. There is hope for every sinner because Jesus welcomes everyone. And with that, let's begin today's reading in the New Testament. April 12th, Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 32. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such despicable people, even eating with them. So Jesus used this illustration. If you had 100 sheep, and one of them strayed away and was lost in the wilderness, wouldn't you leave the 99 others to go and search for the lost one until you found it? And then you would joyfully carry it home on your shoulders. When you arrived, you would call together your friends and neighbors to rejoice with you, because your lost sheep was found. In the same way, heaven will be happier over one lost sinner who returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Or suppose a woman has 10 valuable silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and look in every corner of the house and sweep every nook and cranny until she finds it? And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and neighbors to rejoice with her because she has found her lost coin. In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, instead of waiting until you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and took a trip to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money on wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him to feed his pigs. The boy became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired men have food enough to spare, and here I am, dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired man.'" So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long distance away, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son." But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening in the pen. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found." So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the calf we were fattening and has prepared a great feast. We are celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, "All these years I have worked hard for you, and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the finest calf we have." His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you and I are very close, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." Today we're reading in Psalm 81, where we'll learn about the things that were. This section is an invitation for the people to participate in a joyful celebration, probably a Passover. Asaph gave them 2 reasons for sharing. It was God's ordinance and gratitude, all God had done for them. It's good to set aside special times to meditate on the work of the Lord in your life, even today. And we'll see the things that are. In spite of all that God did for his people, they would not listen to his word or do his will. One of God's most painful judgments is to permit you to have your own way. Now, for a time you enjoy it, and then you learn how much you have missed. And we'll see the things that might have been. Had they obeyed, they would have experienced victory instead of defeat, fullness instead of emptiness, and the best instead of the worst. They could have looked back with rejoicing, but instead, they had to remember with regret. See, the things that might have been will be if today you let the Master have his way. Psalm chapter 81, verses 1 through 16, for the choir director, a psalm of Asaph, to be accompanied by a stringed instrument. Sing praises to God, our strength. Sing to the God of Israel. Sing, beat the tambourine, play the sweet lyre and the harp, sound the trumpet for a sacred feast, when the moon is new, when the moon is full. For this is required by the laws of Israel. It is a law of the God of Jacob. He made it a decree for Israel when he attacked Egypt to set us free. I heard an unknown voice that said, "Now I will relieve your shoulder of its burden. I will free your hands from their heavy tasks. You cried to me in trouble, and I saved you. I answered out of the thundercloud. I tested your faith at Meribah, when you complained that there was no water. Listen to me, O my people, while I give you stern warnings, O Israel, if you would only listen. You must never have a foreign god. You must not bow down before a false god. For it was I, the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it with good things." But no, my people wouldn't listen. Israel did not want me around. So I let them follow their blind and stubborn way, living according to their own desires. But oh, that my people would listen to me. Oh, that Israel would follow me, walking in my paths. How quickly I would then subdue their enemies. How soon my hands would be upon their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him. Their desolation would last forever. But I would feed you with the best of foods. I would satisfy you with wild honey from the rock. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 1. A wise child accepts a parent's discipline. A young mocker refuses to listen.